So I want to do a quick little video. I'm working on this huntress belt, and I needed belt pouches for it, and I couldn't find a good... There was a couple 3D models of some belt pouches, but I couldn't find a good one that was the right size and feel. So I decided to design my own belt pouch. And so I have this template. You can get it on my site as a free download, or if you want to throw me a couple of bucks, it's in my Etsy store. And basically it's a one-piece, give or take, belt pouch, and this is what you get. And these are perfectly scaled for what I need. You can see they have a little magnet enclosure. You can fit stuff in there, and that's what it looks like all done, except it's not attached, obviously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one right now. So I'm using TNT Cosplay's EVA 70 sewable foam. This stuff, by the way, if you haven't tried it, I mean, it's amazing. Look at this. I'm pulling as hard as I can, by the way. And you can see it deformed it because I mangled the heck out of it, but no tear. Versus, you know, craft foam, you can just like ripping paper. This stuff is incredible. This entire belt is actually made out of the top parts here that go around the waist are one layer, and then the bottom part is actually 2 layers that I glued together to make it feel like a real leather belt. And I mean, it's pretty much indestructible. I make all of my belts and straps this way now. So first thing we're going to do, of course, is take our foam, take our pattern, and I always try to find a flat edge if I can to eliminate the amount of cuts I need to make, and trace our pattern. When I'm doing patterns on black foam, I like to use a pencil or something because it's just easier to see, but it also doesn't leave a really heavy mark, and it's easy to clean the marks off later if you need to. So basically it's a bunch of straight lines. Nice and easy, doesn't really get much easier than that. I do like to put a little mark here where that goes, and then I'll flip this guy up. Where these flaps are. Draw those lines in. So there's the basics. Then I'll take one of these guys and just mark my lines so I know where those are going to be later. There we go. Actually see it that time. And so you can see on the pattern, the way that this works is these are the only cut lines other than the rest. And then all of the rest of these I'm going to score with my blade so that it folds easier, but it is all just one piece except for the belt loop. And then I also have one other little piece I've added. Depending on how you're going to fasten it and keep it closed, there's a little detail piece that I use to cover the fastener, but I'll show you that in a minute. So everything else is pretty easy to get. I use one of these pattern wheels to trace where the belt loops go, just because it's easy to do it that way. So I just make these lines here. I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but it makes nice little tracks in the foam, like that. So what I was talking about is I have these little, just these stupid little pieces that I made. Well, so what I'm using are these are magnetic belt clasps, which are perfect for little belt pouches. It's a 2-piece thing. It pushes through whatever your material is. You fold these down, But of course then you have the prongs sticking out. So what I did for these belt pouches, I'm using these, on the top I have just this little flat piece that covers where the prongs are. So it pushes through, this covers it, and it also gives it a nice little, just a little added detail of texture, so it's not so plain. And so what I do is that piece just goes right over top here, and I'm gonna just trace this right now because it also, what I've done is I've made it just long enough that it comes and it meets up with the belt loop, and so they butt up against each other and help support each other. It also makes it easier. I'm just going to mark all these so that way I know where I need to glue later. And then there's also the belt loop piece. Now this one is specifically sized for this belt, so you'll want to adjust depending on what size your belt is, but and I already cut this out earlier, but this is just 1 inch by 3 inches, and then you can see I've scored the edges on that because that's where it folds around and gets glued on the back here to make the belt loop. So I'm going to set that aside for now. I'll set aside my clasp. I also have just this little square piece that I've cut out that goes inside on the back of the prongs. You probably won't be able to see this, but it just goes on the inside back here. It makes a little bit of a ridge inside, but it also means that you're not scratching your hand or any of your things against the prongs of this clasp on the inside. Just a little protective piece that I put on there. Okay, so have the pattern all drawn out. Get your bladed item and start cutting. What I like to do on this part is I actually line up this whole side, and because it's going to be scored, and I'll actually score this. Usually I do 2 light passes to get a good score mark, and then just on the same line cut the part that's going to get cut, and then I'll just follow this the rest of the way down while I'm at it. 1, 2 light passes, and there you go, there's my score mark for that side, all ready to go, and that part's cut. And then I'll do the same thing for this line across here. Score across the whole thing, 2 light passes, and I'll do my cut here for this corner piece that comes off. Same thing over here. While I'm at it, might as well go ahead and do this score. 1, 2. There you go, see? Those nice scores. The nice thing about this foam is that because it's so thick and so, not thick, because it's only 2 millimeters, but because it's so sturdy, even with those score marks, it's still super, super strong. 1, 2, move down. 1, 2, and I'm gonna do this cut. And that cut, yep, okay. And then go ahead and trim off this piece. That is the edge, so I'm gonna cut all the way through. It's done. This bottom just cut off. And then we have these 2, I need to score here in the middle. 1, 2. 1, 2, and then these flaps here get cut because they need to actually fold in. 1, 2, and what we have is a perfectly foldable belt pouch, all one piece, except for the belt loop and any additional trim pieces you want. So next up, we're just gonna throw some barge all over this sucker and glue it all together. All right, we're gonna be breaking out the barge, so safety always. bust this open. So the first thing I like to do actually before I do any of the gluing is first I place my fasteners. And the nice thing is these particular ones are pretty sharp, so they'll just poke right through. And then they also have these little support discs that go in here just to help keep it from pulling through whatever fabric you're using. You can fold them down by hand, but I like to just get some pliers and squeeze them so they're as flush as possible. And then what I'll do is I'll stick the other one on there, fold this around, get it lined up where I want it, and then push just to get it started. I can take this off of here. One of the reasons I do these first is so I can get the exact placement for the piece that glues on inside here. I just like to, especially with a piece like this small, I just like to do all the glue in one shot. It's small enough, and again, it's one piece, so mostly one piece. So you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff overlapping and other stuff. So also, once you actually have everything glued, it's nice to have the fastener on there, because then you just glue everything, stick it all together, and then fasten it, and it helps hold it in place while it cures all the way. So this is just that little piece I was talking about. You can see, just drawing where it goes, so I know where to glue. All right, the gluing begin. So depending on your belt, and like for example with this Huntress one, as you can see, because of those waist straps, there's no way to slide the pouch on and off once on the belt, so I actually have to attach them to the belt once they're all done. So I'm only doing, when I put these belt loops on, as you saw when I showed you the finished one, the strap is only glued on one side. If you're putting it on a belt where you can slide it on and off, then you can go ahead and glue both sides from the get-go. But so what I'm doing right now is I'm not attaching them to the belt, because as you can see, the belt is already painted and finished and all ready to go, and I still have to paint and finish up the belt pouches. So I'm gonna wait until they're all done, and then the very last thing I'm gonna do is attach them to the belt. If you're not familiar with barge, what rock have you been living under? No, seriously though, if you're not familiar with barge because you're new to using foam, or you're just not used to using foam, barge is a contact cement. And so what you have to, the way that you use it is you have to put it on both sides of everything. So you see I just did that square that goes here, and I'm also putting glue on here. And once you have to let it dry until it's tacky, and then stick the two pieces together, and then it sticks. So again, this is where that strap is going to go, so I'm doing the other side of that. Where my little decorative strap goes, it comes and covers this. I'm gonna just get it. You want to try to make sure that you stay inside your lines, because you don't want glue that's actually not in contact with the other piece of your glue. Then you have some mess you have to clean up. So it's also tricky, a little tricky. I messed up one of these before, to remember which side the glue goes on, because the way that the flaps overlap, the back and bottom get glue on the outside, and then the front flap gets glue on the inside. I was zoning out and I just put glue all the way down the whole entire side, front and back flap, which doesn't work because those sides don't ever touch. Fortunately, it's a small enough piece, and it's so quick and easy to put together to make a nice belt pouch that, meh, big deal. Start over, do another one. And yeah, so when you're using barge, it only takes about 5 minutes or so for it to dry enough to start sticking stuff together. So that's the other nice thing about why I like to do this all in one piece. You just have to kind of make sure you're not touching the pieces that you've already done, is that by the time you're done putting all the glue on all the different pieces, the very first pieces are usually pretty much ready to go as far as getting stuck on. So you can start putting stuff together as soon as you're done putting all the glue on. And the other tricky thing, well, not tricky thing, but the other thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing barge is more is not better. You want a nice thin coat. Too much and you actually will get less adhesion if you have too much, if you have like globs, because they don't dry all the way and they don't promote a good surface for bonding the two sides together. So you want to try to keep a nice balance. Oop, that's a little bit too much there. You can always, if you get too much on, you can use something to kind of scrape it and smooth it out. Oh yeah, these little guys are great. You can get them at craft stores. They're just these little art sticks. They're like glorified giant toothpicks basically, but they're good for like smoothing it if you need to. And then the one last spot that needs glue is, I didn't mark this because it's basically the width of the barge brush, so I don't ever mark this part, but that's where that little flap comes up and meets with the back flap. So I just do, and it's on the inside. So if it's not, this is something where if it's not super aligned, if there's a little bit of a mess, you're never going to see it because it's on the inside. That is one thing that's nice about barge, is because it's a contact cement, anything that's not covered by itself isn't going to be sticky. It's only going to stick to more barge. So like these, if there's a little bit sticking out, it's not going to be the end of the world. Okay, so let's start. So as you can see, this here is pretty much dry already, or it seems like it's dry here, right? So dry glue, and I'm just going to stick this on here. Give it a good squeeze. There you go. See, that's on there, not coming off, and nice and protected. The next step, I'm going to put this top piece. What I like to do with this is I align the front, get that started. I go up to the first fold, then I fold this and then wrap it around while it's folded, then fold the back and press that top edge over. The reason I do that is because I want it to be more inclined to be in the closed shape. If I laid it flat and did it, it would be always trying to open itself up. What I also do, once I have all the pieces glued on, is I'll go and hit it with the heat gun, and then here goes the belt strap top part. So like I said, see, it aligns right up against that top strap, so it forms a little bit of continuity between the straps. So I'll hit everything with the heat gun and kind of shape it too to help make it hold that shape. I mean these ones I haven't hit with the heat gun yet, the other three that I made, but you can see it's holding its shape really well. I accidentally glued the first one before I realized I couldn't put these on and off, so I had to take the strap off and put a new strap on. But yeah, I mean, they're holding their shape really well despite not having been heat formed at all yet, but I will heat form it just to give it so it'll have a little bit more crisper edges and lay a little bit flatter. Okay, so we have the strap on, we have that guy on. So the next step is fold in these side tabs, and we're going to fold up the bottom and just fold that over, trying to align the bottom there. There's number one. There's number two. And then you can squeeze these in a little bit. Yeah, see that? You can hear a little bit of tack against my gloves, but it's not sticking or anything. So then we're going to fold this up. You want to align that inner edge so that it makes a nice seam and folds nicely. And then just fold it over. There's side one. Do the same thing with this, kind of push that in a little bit. Make sure it lines up right along the seam. Fold it over. Then you can stick your finger inside even and to get a better squeeze on it. You can see it's trying to lay flat a little bit and bow out, but like I said, what I do is once I have everything on there, put the snap on, and then I'll let it cure that way. I'll go back and hit all these with a heat gun. As far as finishing these, what I'm going to do, which this is the same thing I did with the rest of this belt, is I didn't even know this existed until recently, but they make fabric Mod Podge. It's the same thing as Mod Podge. It applies the same way. It's pretty much the same consistency. It's a little bit thicker actually, but it seems the same at first glance as regular Mod Podge. The difference is that when it dries, it's super flexible. So like this belt, for example, I mean, look at this. You can flex it, but it gives it that same kind of Mod Podge coat that you'd regularly do on foam. For this, what I've actually been doing is, so I coated everything in Mod Podge, the fabric Mod Podge, and then I'm painting it with Angelus leather paints because I also want the paint to still stay flexible. So this is painted with Angelus purple leather paint, and you can see it's super flexible, and it's also, I'm not going to try and tear it since this is done, and then I also use these cool flush snaps to attach the belt in the back. Cast a little gem in the front. I'm really happy with the way this is turning out, and especially with the little belt pouches I designed. So that's my little belt pouch. Like I said, you can get it in my store if you want to drop me a couple dollars, but you can also go to my site and it's a free download. I'm going to start putting up free templates on my website, but also, you know, I'll put them in my shop at a really, I think they're like $1 or $2. But just, if you want to support me and kick me back a couple bucks, you can. Otherwise, they're freely available for people who can't afford to pay anything but want a cool little template. All right, thanks a lot.